We are talking with comedian John Early, comedian and fair to say musician also, right, John?
You know what? I'll take it. I'll accept it. Thank you.
Because you do mix your comedy with music at times, and you have a new album out now more than ever. Well, it's not out now. It doesn't come out until when? September 15th? Is that when it comes out?
September 13th, which I've just found out is Friday the 13th. So.
Oh no, that's no pressure there.
Well, if it goes horribly, I can pretend to suddenly be a superstitious person and blame that.
Who signed off on this, for crying out loud? Jesus, right?
I wasn't paying attention.
I was recently talking to TJ Miller, who also is putting an album out, and I was talking to him about, you don't hear that a lot with comedians anymore. At least I don't. It's usually, I have a new Netflix special out. I have a new YouTube special out. You don't hear the album thing, and you're actually putting yours out on vinyl, which I think is really cool. And that's the
Thank you.
That's the age, like when vinyl was the only thing. That's the age where I discovered comedy, when my neighbor brought over a copy of a George Carlin album. I think it was Occupation Fool, and he did a whole bit on farts. And as a third grader, he became God to me at that point. And I was just wondering, who was it that you heard, a comedy album that you heard that may have inspired you to get into comedy?
My dad had the Andy Griffith comedy album.
Oh, okay.
And we used to listen to that constantly when we were very young. And then, also there's the Nichols and May comedy album.
Right.
That was really inspiring to me. And, as I got older, I started listening to Sandra Bernhardt's live stuff. And that was, she's is all over this project. Her influence is very clear, I think. But, I think there was also a country music singer. I grew up in Nashville. There's this country music singer named Marshall Chapman who had a live album that was in a women's prison.
Okay.
And something about that too. I think it's just anything live that's audio. Audio of anything live, I think, is particularly. It needs to be in album form, and it especially needs to be in vinyl form, because you pick up on all the weird little audience sounds, and it takes you there in your imagination more than a visual thing for some reason.
Well, you get to actually use your imagination. That's
yes, exactly.
Yeah, you get to
engaged. Yeah,
yeah, and in any live situation, music or comedy, nothing will ever beat that energy, the back and forth between the artist and the audience, and the reaction to both.
Yeah,
and
yeah, exactly. And a huge part of I as a live performer, I really just worship Bette Midler, Sandra Bernhardt, these people who do this kind of psychedelic cabaret thing, and they're kind of ranters, monologuers, and they do these kind of groovy but honestly totally sincere covers. And I think a lot of people think of those two as these kind of polished, campy gay icons, but they're actually to me, they're rock stars. If you think about what Bette Midler was doing in the 70s, she was doing these crazy sweaty performances in bathhouses and duetting with Bob Dylan, and she was so cool. And so a lot of this too is inspired by her, the vinyls I have of hers from the 70s, where she's doing these crazy covers, and she's so, I don't know, and she's all while simultaneously being so funny, and I don't know.
Yeah, I again, as a kid, friends of the family would bring over Bette Midler albums, and I just remember everybody just laughing. I didn't really get the humor, but everybody just. Not just the music, but her banter in between. So if you were to recommend a Bette Midler album to someone who only knows Bette Midler from, say, Beaches, or as a movie star, not so much a performer, what album would you recommend?
Well, the first two I think are flawless. They don't really have the live stuff in between, but the Divine Miss M and the and Songs for a Depression, I think it's called. That those aren't the live ones, but there's the special she did, Divine Madness, and that you can.
Yes.
It's like from the early '80s, and you can stream that or like rent it or something. It's so good, and it like looks so beautiful, and there are these amazing sketches, and it's just amazing. And it's always just amazing with her specifically to see the way the audience reacts to her. They just love her so much. It's so sweet.
And what was it first for you? Was it the performing music, or was it doing comedy? And then how did those kind of intersect with your life? Like, how did those come together as your show is now?
Yeah, I mean, to honestly probably comedy. I mean, in the kind of most primal sense, like I was just always kind of a ham,
Right.
Always had the instinct to get up and, I was like making my peers at daycare do sketches from the Brady Bunch, like reenact scenes from the Brady Bunch, like a true psycho. And I would always play Jan, of course. And then the music, I grew up going to, my parents are both Presbyterian ministers. Like I grew up,
Oh, wow.
like singing hymns and stuff in church, and that was the only thing that got me through church was like the musical part of it, because otherwise it was so totally boring, so I that's kind of where the music love started. And then I think when I started doing stand up, I think the music was more a result of just not wanting to be alone on stage. I just really was looking around. I was like, there's something icky about this. I would rather have some of my friends up here with me. And I started playing. I started like putting this band together, and that's like the band that plays on the album. And they, it was just like so much nicer to have someone to interact with, to flirt with, to, harass. And and I think also too, there's something so funny to me about, when I first started stand up, and still today somewhat, it's like I perform in dive bars and like these weird venues, these like little alternative comedy shows that are in apartments and stuff. And so doing these tiny shows with a music component, treating it like I'm like a pop star in a giant stadium, was really funny to me.
And your band is called the Lemon Squares. Now, unfortunately, I don't think they're going to be. Are they going to be at the Boston gig at the Wilbur on October 15th?
Well, Michael Hessline, thank you for saying the date and the venue. Michael Hessline is he's like the guy who really arranged all the music, and we make all this stuff together. He plays the keys. And he's going to come with the keyboard, with an acoustic guitar. He made these really lush tracks that really fill it out. And he sings harmonies with me. So we're a small band technically, but we still have a big sound.
Right. Okay. And, I was reading up, and you can see videos. I was watching them on Amazon, or I was listening to there's some samples of the album on Amazon Music. I was watching some videos on YouTube. You cover people like the Britney Spears, and you do Aaliyah, and you do some Dolly Parton. But then I also read you cover Neil Young. I'm just interested. I'm a huge Neil Young fan. Huge Neil Young fan. I actually did a podcast about Neil Young for a few years. And what song do you do for Neil?
We do After the Gold Rush.
Oh my! But how do you do After the Gold Rush? That's what I should ask.
Well, it's the big, not to give anything away, but it is kind of like the big kind of. I mean, if you can call it, it's like a little bit of a surprise in the show. It's everything else kind of has this like pop disco kind of frenzy to it, and then I do this stretch of material that's kind of about the internet and how depressing life is with the phone and the internet and all the kind of like language we've all kind of received from the internet that's so hollow and depressing, and it gets really kind of melancholy, the show. And then it's like all underscored, this whole monologue. And then it kind of swells into this cover After the Gold Rush, which to me, like, felt like I was originally going to do a Madonna song, and then I couldn't stop thinking about doing Neil Young. I was like, I think it just thematically felt so related. This kind of like bombed out world and like going off to another planet, like, I don't know, it really, and I was kind of like, I think this would be incredibly moving, and then I also think it would be incredibly funny to do something so moving. And it really works. It really works, and that's my favorite cover of all the ones we've done.
Oh wow, yeah, I love that song. I got to say, I've never thought I'd ever hear anyone say, well, I was going to do a Madonna song, but I did Neil Young instead.
I know. I know. Well, thankfully, I was going through a breakup at the time, so I was just like, I was more like in a Neil Young mood than I was in a Madonna mood.
All right, there you go. Have you ever done a duet with an artist that you've loved? And if you haven't, who would you love to do a duet with?
Mm. Oh my God! Well, I did do a guest vocals on a cover of "Last Christmas" with this girl Molly Birch, who's a genius kind of indie musician right now. It's my appearance is a joke, to be very clear. But who would I duet with? I mean, I would love to sing with like. I've been listening so much to Trio, and they actually did a cover of After the Gold Rush too, which we based our version of. And it's Dolly Parton, Emmylou Harris, and Linda Ronstadt.
Wow, yeah.
And Emmylou Harris, I grew up in Nashville. I'd always see her around, and to me, there's nothing like her voice, like the kind of readiness of it. She's so cool. Like I don't know. I think I would do Emmylou Harris, so I would never expect her to want to do that with me, obviously.
Well, you never know. I mean, it doesn't hurt to ask, right?
Yeah.
Tell her you do a Neil Young cover. That may draw her in. She did a lot of work with Neil, so
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. Well, John Early, it's been great talking with you. Go check out John's show. It's October 15th at the Wilbur Theater in Boston. Oh, one last thing: is Vicky going to make an appearance?
She is. It's really cool. She's going on tour with me, and
okay.
She's bringing in a different kind of crowd, which I really appreciate. But yeah, she's gonna be there. The fans love her more than they love me, which is always humbling. But yeah, she's gonna be there.
Was that something that you just kind of started doing as a lark, and then it just kind of took off? Like it became huge?
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. I mean, she's like kind of like all my aunts, like my southern aunts, kind of like in one body, her voice has kind of always been there for me. But yeah, it was like I was with my friends and we were trying to go out the door to go to some bar, and I was actually sincerely looking for my denim like jacket. And they were like, "Come on, John, we got to hurry." And I started doing her voice. I was like, "Don't cross my Christian ass when I'm looking for my denim." And that it makes no sense. But then that kind of became her catchphrase about denim and looking for her denim. It's so bizarre, but people somehow get it, and they play along. When I come out, on stages, her people like. They scream the catchphrase back at her, and they really treat her like she's this like comedy icon.
Well, I think it's because everybody knows, or at least I do. Everybody knows Vicky. I know a few Vickies.
Yeah, exactly.
I lived in Richmond, Virginia through most of the 90s. I met a bunch of Vickies while I was down there.
Yeah.
And then
my grandparents lived in Richmond.
Oh, really? Yeah, I lived there like through pretty much all the 90s.
I spent a lot of time there.
Yeah, that's a great city. But we have Massachusetts versions of Vicky, except they're wearing Patriots jerseys and they got a Truly in their hands and they're swearing their heads off. So,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, John,
Vicky is eternal.
Yeah, she is. Everybody knows a Vicky. That's why she's so popular. It's like, that's my neighbor. Yeah. John, thank you so much. I appreciate you checking in and taking the time to speak with us. And again, October 15th at the Wilbur Theater. Go see John Early. Thanks a lot, John.
Thanks for having me.